Welcome to the latest episode of the Three-Piece Combo MMA Show, brought to you by the 5 Reasons Sports Network. I'm your host, Jonathan, and you can find me on Twitter at Three-Piece Combo, just spell it out. Of course, we want to first of all thank you guys all for today and coming in and watching the video. What we're going to start off with is we're going to go ahead and we're going to break down some of the fights that happened on Saturday on UFC Vegas 9, Overeem versus Sakai. After that, we're going to go into Dana White's Contender series. We're going to talk about some of the winners, see who got some contracts, see who missed out on some contracts, and maybe why they missed out. And to, of course, finish it off, we're going to just go over any MMA news that you guys might have missed so far this week. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So starting off, we had Overeem versus Sakai in the main event, and it was a pretty good main event. It started off with Sakai just really taking it to, getting the clinch, really getting that clinch started and trying to close that distance between Overeem, and then Overeem staying back, not allowing the clinch to take too much effect to him. He did get some good shots in the clinch, like we talked about in our last video. We know that Overeem does have the ability to finish in the clinch, close to kind of like how he finished Brock Lesnar in his UFC debut. Now, getting into the fight, Overeem won in the 5th round by TKO via ground and pound, but it could have get stopped in the 4th, had maybe 30 more seconds left. Herb Dean, the ref of the match, he saw that Sakai coming into the 5th round, he didn't really have much of a chance. And if Overeem took him down and did the same thing he did at the end of round 4, which was just taking him down, wrestling him down to the floor, keeping that top position and hitting some really good ground and pound. So Overeem did a really good job of executing his game plan. We knew that he wanted to wrestle. We talked about this in our last video. That for him to win the game, to fight, he's going to have to push Sakai to the 4th and 5th round because he doesn't have that experience yet. And then for Overeem, really just wanted to make sure that he stays on top position. If he wants to wrestle him to the floor, he can just stay on top, get that ground and pound. Now, Sakai didn't start off bad. He really didn't start off too bad. He won rounds 1 through 3, in my opinion. And if he had used the same strategy throughout round 4 and 5, maybe against a lesser of a fighter, he could have won that fight. But since Overeem knew that he wanted to get into the clinch and probably didn't have the stamina for rounds 4 and 5, he really just showed that he had a lack of experience. Even though he had such a good record, he has a lack of experience, and Alistair exposed that. He took him to the ground, and where he knew he had an absolute weakness on the ground, an absolute advantage over Sakai, and he did his job. He did what he did have to do, and he got the knockout, and he finished. And like we said, Sakai did a good job through rounds 1 and 3, but it was Overeem round 4 and 5, just wrestling, good trips, and just taking it down, get some good ground and pound. Now for Overeem, what we want to see next from him is probably another top contender. There's really 2 good options. You have Jairzinho Rozenstruik, because he's, they had that fight before where Overeem pretty much dominated him for 4.5 rounds, and he let Jairzinho get up. Jairzinho got up, knocked him out at the last second. Ref called it at the buzzer. So he didn't have too much good luck with that one. He even said in his post-fight interview that he considers that fight a win anyways. So that versus Jairzinho, that would be a good rematch, just because it would allow him to propel himself forward above Jairzinho. The top of this division is stacked right now. Of course, we know we have Francis Ngannou sitting probably right at the top. I would say he's probably the #1 contender. Then you have Jairzinho Rozenstruik, you have Curtis Blades, and now you have John Jones. So you have those guys sitting at top of you right now, and for him to propel himself, he wants to become a UFC champion, Alistair does. So if he wants to become a UFC champion, he's going to have to fight these top guys, knock some of them down, because if he doesn't do that, he's 40 right now. He does look in great shape. He does look like his experience is really paying off more than his age is looking. So he does have seems to have a shot at, if he wants to fulfill his dream of become the UFC heavyweight champion for the first time, he can definitely do that. But he would have to knock down some of these contenders. He would have to start with Jairzinho Rozenstruik. The other option for him would be Derek Lewis. Now, he does have a match versus Curtis Blades on November 28th, so that's a little bit of a time. Alistair said he did want to spend some time with his family right now instead of, training all the time. He took 8 weeks apart from them. So he didn't want to, maybe he doesn't want to fight right away, which would be okay, because for Jairzinho, he didn't take too much damage in his last fight. So it would be an easy match for the fight matchmakers to put together, because neither of them really took too much damage. and they're pretty fresh. So if they want to put the fight together in 3 months, allow Overeem to get his rest, they could possibly put it in for December card, and we'll see how that works. Now, what Sakai needs to really work on, for Sakai moving forward, he's going to need to really work on his conditioning and his ground game. He showed absolutely no resistance on the ground. He struggled to maintain a full guard. Alistair almost had him in half guard the entire time. So he had really good control, and obviously when a heavyweight is laying down ground and pound, it's a lot heavier, a lot more intense than if a flyweight or a middleweight or something like that is doing ground and pound. Just because it's so much more impact on those guys. Now, for Sakai, maybe a good matchup for him next would be Alexander Gustafsson, because he is, maybe not in the heavyweight division, but he is a former title challenger, and he's well-rounded. He has the experience. He had those 2 fights with John Jones. So for him, that would be a good fight for him. He's not ranked, I believe, 15th right now. So knocking down a guy after taking a loss, knocking down someone who's, ranked a little bit below you just to hold your spot, that would be something pretty good for him. Now, moving on to the next fight, we did see OSP knock out Alonzo Minifield with that wicked left hand. Now, for OSP, he really fought a good fight. He kept his range. We already knew he wanted to do that because he had the height advantage. So he kept his range, and he used those really big legs and those long legs to go ahead and keep Minifield at distance. So Minifield was reluctant to strike. So when he would try to get in, he would try to close the distance really quickly, and then OSP would throw a leg kick or something like that to deter him. So going into the second round, what Minifield tried to do, he tried to get a body shot with the right and then come up with the left, with an overhand left. Now, after he threw a body shot, he didn't pull his hand up to his guard, so OSP threw a perfect counter left into a perfect knockout. And they say, if you fall on your face, it's a knockout, because you didn't even have the ability to stop yourself from going face first into the ground. So it was a really good knockout by OSP. Now for OSP, what we might want to see moving forward, he is ranked, I believe, number 12 in the light heavyweight division. So what we might want to see with him is for him to fight somebody a little bit higher now. He fought 2 guys ranked roughly in the 20s. He did a good job, though. He won the fight using his length, using his leg reach. He kept the smaller fighter at bay. So he did a good job fighting these fights. Now, what we want to see for him maybe is somebody just a little bit higher. He does have, former title challenger experience, so he has that ability, and he's been in the game for a little bit, so he should have that respect from the matchmakers to give him a good matchup, since he's knocked down a few of these lower ranked contenders. So a couple of matchups that might work well for him might be either number 8 Anthony Smith, who just took another loss to Rakic, and that would be a good fight because it would really, Smith doesn't seem like he's in a great place right now, so I don't know if he wants to take a fight anytime soon. But for OSP, he's getting a higher ranked contender. Another guy he could fight is Jiri, and for him, he's number 7th ranked contender right now. It would be a good fight because even though he's ranked number 7th, he hasn't really fought many contenders. And Jiri Prochazka is, he has a good record, but still hasn't really fought many fighters with UFC experience. He does have the last fight he had was against a UFC fighter, but I believe the 2 before that wasn't. He has a 1-0 record right now. But he comes in and he won the fight, so give him that. But for him to be able to move up the rankings in the light heavyweight division, what he might want to do is face OSP. It'd be advantageous to him because he's facing a former title challenger and somebody who has a name to them. So now you propel yourself forward, trying to get that title shot, in the future. Now, for Minifield, he started off 9-0 in his career. He lost the last 2, the first one being with Clark, which he got gassed out, and then this one with OSP where he got knocked out. So, the window might be closing for him a little bit. It's hard to tell what's next for him just because he's ranked roughly mid-20s, in the rankings. For him to want to maybe get his career back on track with the UFC, maybe want to take an easier fight, somebody ranked mid-30s, just so he can propel himself back forward. He's 32, so if he wants to push himself forward, at least to contention, for the rankings at least, he should, fight somebody probably a little bit easier. Now, getting to, my pick for fight of the night, the Michel Pereira versus Ali Imidaz. It was a really good fight. Unfortunately, he didn't get fight of the night, but Pereira did end up getting a performance award because he finished it with a third-round choke, which some people thought Imidaz didn't tap. It was close, but it didn't really matter because Pereira was just destroying him the whole fight. It wasn't even close to any of the rounds going for Imidaz. Even the third round, it wasn't close. So whether it was a finish or whether it was a decision, it was going to go to the same winner. So they would end up having the same win-loss anyways. Now, it was really fun to watch him fight. Pereira just showed really good gamesmanship because, as we know, Imidaz slapped him in the face-offs. Now, after we saw that, all right, Pereira just takes it down in the match. And what he does, he licks his hand and he slaps him, and then he slaps him again. So he gets really good slaps in. He just showed good gamesmanship. He did like a front flip kick to try to hit his head. He just finished, I think, round one just dancing, backing up and dancing, and just throwing a bomb at the end of it just in case he did catch him off guard. And what's next for him? He deserves a pretty good shot against somebody who's pretty well ranked or pretty well named, just because he has such a good good gamesmanship as a fighter, and he's a good fighter. If he didn't take that disqualification loss to Diego Sanchez for the illegal knee, which probably would never happen again, and he was beating Diego by far. Diego's past his prime, and he was beating him. So if he would have got that win, he would have won 5 of his last 6. So it's not like he's not a talented fighter. With that being said, a lot of people are asking for Mike Perry versus Pereira because, it would be a lot of fun to see just 2 really interesting characters go at it. If that fight did happen, I would probably have to take Perry just because the dude's an animal. He's not going to back down, and he has some problems to take care of. It would still be a good fight to see just because they're just both such exciting gamesman fighters. They have a character. They're not just fighters. They actually have a personality with them, which it's not bad if you don't have a personality. Just let your talking in the ring do it. But if you have a personality, you get skyrocketed so much more quickly. So it's definitely would be a good fight to see. Another option for Pereira, a good fight for him would be against Randy Brown. Now, Randy Brown is a good fighter. He lost his last fight against Vicente Luque, which was, I think he's about the 16th ranked contender right now. So he's up there. He's up there in the rankings. So for Pereira to fight somebody who's just lost to somebody who's close to the rankings, that would just seem like almost like a natural stepping stone for him just to continue to move himself up to the rankings, because that's obviously something he wants to do. And he's still young. He's not that old. I think he's just 26. So for somebody who's that, at that age, you already have good ground game. You have good knockout game. You just want to keep pushing yourself up. Now for Randy Brown, I think he's just 1 or 2 fights above 500 in the UFC. So he doesn't have the best record. So for him, the benefit for him to take that fight you'd be taking down somebody who has a name. Now Pereira did call out Masvidal, but that fight's not going to happen, which is good because now Masvidal is becoming the new McGregor. People just want to call him out because he's the BMF champ and he's from Miami and he's a dog. So that's why everybody wants to fight him. He's the new McGregor. He's not even the new McGregor. He's just the first Masvidal. So it's very exciting to see somebody come out of South Florida. Go ahead and take that out. Now, for Imidaz, after starting his career 8-0, he's lost his last 3, which isn't good for somebody who's trying to continue, work their way up the ranks and for just getting started. Now, with the UFC, they've just signed, I think, 20 contracts with Dana White's Contender series, fighters that are going to newly be added to the UFC roster. With that happening, you're going to lose some people on the back end of the roster who aren't performing like they said they would, or aren't performing like they should, or maybe they were doing good somewhere else and they come in the UFC and they're unable to fight UFC competition. Some people just need more time to learn. Maybe there's not the right time right now. Maybe they rushed it. So with somebody like Imidaz, he might get cut. That's what we might see. But we don't know yet. You know, he might get another shot. If you start off 8-0, it's not usually just by accident. There's a reason why you start off 8-0, but it's unlikely that, you know, he'll be on the UFC much longer if he continues the way he's going. The next fight on the card we had was Fabinski versus Muniz. Now, if you're watching our pre-fight show that was out on Saturday, we actually called that Muniz was going to take this fight because we've seen that Fabinski averages about 7 takedowns per fight, but he has 0 submission attempts. And we know that Muniz is a good submission artist. He is a Brazilian jiu-jitsu specialist, and he's able to, you know, he goes for those submissions. I think he averaged about like 1.5 every fight. So has that ability to work off his back and finish him, and that's what happened. You know, he got submitted in the first round, and he just showed that if you can get the takedown and you can't do anything with it, you know, or, you know, can't fight past the guard because somebody has a really strong guard and they're keeping you locked in, or if you're trying to pass the guard and you can only get to half guard and you're not effective with those strikes and the referee has to stand you up, those takedowns don't mean anything. And for Muniz, he showed that since he had that submission experience, he was able to get the fight to where he wanted no matter what. If he wasn't going to take Fabinski down, he was going to have the advantage in the fight. If he got taken down by Fabinski because of his lack of submission attempts, he knows that he would still have an advantage in the fight. So it was really good for him to just show that, you know, he was a more dominant fighter. I think he did come in as the underdog, but we called it. We called that he was going to win the fight. Now for Muniz, he's doing pretty well as far as his career. He started on the Dana White Contender Series in 2018. He won, but it was by decision, so he didn't get a contract. And he came in last year in 2019. He won that time, and he finished that fight, and he won the contract. So he's 2-0 in the Contender Series, and he's won both of his fights in the UFC. Now I think he's ranked somewhere in the upper 30s. Now, somebody he might want to fight would be like Eric Anders, just because he's a name. You know, people are aware of who he is. He's a little bit older in his career, and he's lost 5 of his last 7. So for him, for Anders, what would be the advantage for him to take that fight would be that he's going to fight somebody that's up and coming and not have to take as hard of a fight just because he's a known name and lose and maybe build himself back up, win a couple of fights in a row. And because if you lose 5 of your last 7 and you know that 25 to 30 contenders are going to be added to the UFC roster, some people are going to get cut. So for him, you want to win more fights, obviously. And for Muniz, you're getting somebody who's a veteran of the UFC, so you're going to be able to get your name up a little bit higher. If you've already won 2 in the Contender Series, you've already won 2 in the UFC, so now just to get your name higher and work your way up to the top, go ahead and take that fight against a well-known name. The next fight we had on the card was the Keller versus Rodriguez fight. Now, we knew that Rodriguez came in on 2 days' notice, so he didn't have as much time to get prepared for the fight. And then Brian, you know, he comes in having 2 substitutions. You know, his first fight, it went out of the door because of COVID. And then the second fight, another time where the fighter had to pull out. So he lost 2 fights, basically. And, you know, as a fighter, you only get 3 fights, maybe 4 fights if you're active a year. So for him, you're losing a paycheck now. So it was really nice of Rodriguez, which was, you know, said by Keller in the post-fight, that he appreciated Rodriguez to take the fight, even though it was on 2 days' notice. Unfortunately for him, that lack of preparation seemed to show. Keller finished in the first 40 seconds, and he finished with a guillotine. So he got in there, he gets a Performance of the Night award, and it was really good to see him push forward and just push through the problem that you lose 2 fights, and you're not sure when your next fight is going to be. And then we also saw that, moving on to the lower fights of the card, Vivian Araujo defeated Montano de la Rosa by decision, and we saw Hunter Azure defeat Cole Smith via decision, and that was a good fight for Azure. He came in as the underdog, and he just controlled the fight with the wrestling and made sure that Cole wasn't able to get up, to use his striking, and he just did a good job overall. Moving on to the Dana White Contender Series, we saw that happen last night. Many of you might have missed it just because we saw the Heat move on to the Eastern Conference Finals. But we did see 4 contracts get awarded last night. We're going to go ahead and start with the main event. We had Tefan Chukwui defeat Al Montavio. via head kick, and it was a very brutal head kick for Montavio. I don't think he woke up for about 8 to 12 minutes. And obviously, if you're going to hit a head kick knockout in the main event of Dana White's Contender series, you're going to get a liking from Dana White. You know, how can you not? So it was really nice to see him finish off the night with the main event with the head kick. And like I said, he was out for a good minute. They tried to keep interviewing him just so they can not cut to the loser of the fight. But he was really out there for about a good 8 to 12 minutes before he got back up, and maybe even longer, to be honest with you. But he was the first, the last contract awarded of the night. Now, second fight, we had Sherrard Blackledge defeat Cameron Church, and that was a unanimous decision. And he did control the fight. You know, it was 30-27 on 2 judges' cards, 29-28 on 1 judge's cards. So it was really, he did control the fight, but with Dana White's Contender series, if you don't have a shot, if you don't finish the fight, you're probably not going to get a contract. The good thing for him is that he did get an invitation that we know that they're doing it again in November. So he's an invitation to November, so he'll get a fight then. We saw Philip Hawes defeat Kazimurad Bestayev, and that was a really good knockout because he started really strong against the legs. Bestayev, he had a 7-inch height advantage. He was 6'6", Hawes is 5'11". He kept chopping at the low kicks, and he noticed that Bestayev actually kept his hands down about rib height instead of higher because he was facing a shorter guy. But what Megatron did, he just hit him with an overhand right because his hands were so low, and he kept leaving his guard down, so he hit him with a counter right, and it was a big fight for him. He showed good patience, obviously against a much taller fighter with a 7-inch height advantage. And he got the second contract of the night. Now, he did get the right hand, and then he finished it with a little bit of ground and pound. So it was almost a straight right, a straight knockout, but they declared it a TKO, which I think they could have gave it a knockout. We saw that Dricar Rodriguez defeated Mana Martinez with a triangle choke in the first round, and that was a pretty exciting fight because we saw him. It was very short, obviously. It was 2 minutes and 22 seconds into the first round, but he showed that he had good boxing skills, and he hit him with a good right hand, and that stunned him, so he tried to go ahead and get him for the takedown, and when he was on his back, he was able to lock in the triangle. Martinez tried to get him up and slam him down, but unfortunately it didn't really do anything but tighten up the triangle choke, and he tried to hit some hammer fists, and he actually just eventually passed out. And it was a fun fight to watch. It was a very quick submission. We saw somebody struggle to really just try to fight out of the submission, but he was unable to. Moving on to the first fight of the night, we saw that Aliashkab Kazriev defeated Hengray Shigemoto with the rear naked choke, and that was in 50 seconds. So it was really quickly in the first round, and I think it was the second quickest submission in UFC Dana White Contender Series history. So it was exciting just to see somebody be able to get that submission that fast. We know with Dana, what he likes to see is finishes. So if you get the finishes in the Contender Series, you're most likely to get a contract. And if you're unable to get the finish, you're probably not going to get a contract. Now we're going to get into some news that you might have missed during the week, what's going on. We saw that Nick Diaz is actually asking for a UFC return. He did a mock weight cut where he cut weight down just to see how it would affect his body. Obviously taking the weight cut down to lower your weight just below the 170. For him, it's going to be 170 number. And then reinflating, eating, rehydrating, doing those things, that it takes an effect on the body. So you want to make sure that after 5 years, because he hasn't fought in 5 years, that you can do that. Now, speaking about his last fight was a no contest against Anderson Silva. He did get busted for testing positive for substances, but he does not agree with those tests. He doesn't believe that he did that. So obviously, that's why he hasn't fought in 5 years. That's one of the main reasons he hasn't fought in 5 years, just because him and Nate, they kind of move the same way. It's the same reason Nate hasn't fought in so many times, or in so many years until recently. So for him, his last fight was against Anderson Silva 5 years ago. So it's going to be interesting to see how he's able to come back as far as his shape, as far as his readiness, and what he's able to do. Now, we have a couple of people that want to fight him. Wonder Boy was one of the people that called him out. And, you know, there's a couple other people. Obviously, everybody wants to fight him. Dan Hardy was another one that both guys could actually make their comeback at the same time. The more interesting fight, obviously, you would want to see him maybe fight Masvidal. If Masvidal beats Nate Diaz for the BMF, it would just be proper lineage for him to beat the big brother and go ahead and beat Nick. So it would be nice for him to see maybe that. Just as far as a money fight would go, that would be a big money fight. It would sell a lot of pay-per-views. Masvidal's a draw, Nick's a draw, so you know that's going to be something that works, and it's going to be in 2021. So we don't know if he'll fight somebody first before he tries to fight Masvidal, maybe for the BMF title, just for, you know, why not? But that would be a good big money fight for him. On to the next piece of news. What we have is see that Khamzat Chimaev is actually getting double booked moving forward. And the reason Dana believes that he could do this for him is that he showed such dominance over his first 2 fights that we should, you know, we will see him run over Gerald Meerschaert, and then he has a fight lined up with Damian Maia after. Now, it's going to be very interesting because Gerard already said that he doesn't want to let Chimaev leave the cage walking in his next fight, because it's very disrespectful, because it's almost like you're booking a scheduled loss for somebody and you're just feeding this guy into the hype train. And for Meerschaert, he doesn't want to take that disrespect, so he says, all right, if you're gonna try to disrespect me, I'm gonna make sure that I leave this contender that you guys want to build up and just make run over me and just go straight to Damian Maia. I'm gonna make sure that he doesn't able to leave the cage to walk. So it's gonna be very fun to see, you know, the heat that's on this fight. Obviously, we know that, you know, you're disrespecting somebody that's a fighter, so that's not something you want to do very often, at least. Now, former title challenger Ricardo Lamas, he is retiring. He announced that he is going to retire after his last fight. He did go out on a win, and he finished with the fight of the night because he lost the first round, came back, won the second round, won the third round. It was really close. He's, you know, for a background for him, he started in the WEC in 2009, continued in the UFC in 2011, and all the way until now. So he's been with, you know, UFC promotions for about 11 years, and it's good for him that he's finishing with a win and he's able to continue. So best of luck for him for the rest of his career. Unfortunately, we do see that Charles Oliveira is out against Beneil Dariush. We don't know why. There's not really a disclosure as far as what's going to happen with that fight next, but for right now, Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush is off. We do see a couple of fight bookings. William Knight, who was the Dana White Contender Series last week winner with elbows and his opponent in the crotch sniffing area, he's actually going to fight Alexa Cammers on UFC 253, which is at the end of this month. So it's a very quick turnaround for somebody who just won a contract on Dana White Contender Series, already making his pay-per-view debut. Might be at the prelims, but you're still on the pay-per-view. Next, we see that the Ultimate Fighter is going to probably be after the Fight Island, and Fight Island is going to be in October, most likely, with the Khabib versus Gaethje fight. So maybe we can look forward to that happening in November. That's probably what's likely. We might see Ultimate Fighter, and then we're going to see Dana White Contender Series. We know that Adesanya is going to be one team and Costa is going to be one team, so it's going to be very competitive, just because both guys are really good characters. Paulo Costa posted a video of him chasing around a guy that looked like Adesanya, and Adesanya just trying to run around and leave the cage because, you know, Costa thinks that Adesanya is a runner. And then we know that, you know, personally I do think that Adesanya is going to win that fight just because he does have the speed advantage, and, you know, making sure somebody doesn't hit you is part of the fight. So, you know, it's going to be good heat just to see those guys go at it, you know, after their title fight, which is going to be a really good fighter title fight. That's going to be a September 26th, UFC 253, and it's probably going to be on ESPN Plus or however they do their pay-per-views. We see that Cody Garbrandt does have COVID-19, so he's supposed to fight UFC 255 in November against Davison Figueroa for the flyweight title. Flyweight title. So that's going to be interesting to see how that affects him moving forward, because he, you know, COVID affects your lungs. So if it's something that's showing symptoms, we don't know how that'll affect him, especially if he's going to have to do a weight cut on top of that. He does have this, the time to recover, obviously, if this fight's in November. But it's going to be interesting to see how he's going to handle the speed of Deiveson Figueroa. We get the third booking of Magomed Ankalaev versus Ian Cutelaba on UFC 254 on Yas Island in Abu Dhabi, and that's going to be the biggest card of the year, in my opinion. You have Nurmagomedov versus Justin Gaethje. They're still talking about putting Dustin Poirier versus Tony Ferguson together, which would be insane. You have the newly killer rising up the ranks, Jared Cannonier, facing the former middleweight champion Robert Whittaker, and then you have Rafael dos Anjos facing off against Islam Makhachev. Below that, you're going to have Alexander Volkov take on Walt Harris, and now you're adding Ian Cutelaba versus Ankalaev against this. This is going to be a very great card coming up. On Saturday, we will have UFC Vegas 10, Waterson versus Hill. We'll have the fight preview for that here on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. And we're also going to have any more news that's going on happening during the week. By the end of the week on Saturday, we'll go ahead and cover that too. Now, that's all for this episode of the 3-Piece Combo MMA Show, brought to you by the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Be sure to check out all our shows on YouTube and check us out on 5reasonsports.com. Thank you guys, and we'll see you next time.